Welcome to the JALTCALL podcast. I'm your host for the day, James York, and I'm joined by Jeanette, Dennisson.
Hey.
We are the conference chairs for the JALTCALL 2026 conference, and we're very much looking forward to seeing you all there. Today, we are talking with Brent Warner, one of our keynote speakers for the JALTCALL 2026 conference.
Hello.
Hey Brent, thanks
Hi.
for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Just going to go through a bit of Brent's background here, and he's going to make sure that I get this right. But Brent is a professor at Irvine Valley College in California, where he teaches ESL and works extensively with faculty on integrating technology into language education. Over the past decade or more, as we just talked about off air, Brent has become widely recognized for his work in educational technology for language learning, particularly in the areas of late artificial intelligence, AI literacy for teachers, technology enhanced writing, gamification and AI chatbots, and digital tools for multilingual learners. So he has a broad repertoire of skills and interests here. He's also known for the podcast as a co-host for the podcast DIESOL, it's spelled DIESOL, which stands for, I actually forgot this. So
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
there we go. Thanks so much for that. Where he and Ishell Reyes explore the intersection of technology, pedagogy, and language teaching. He very quickly, actually, Brent very quickly recognized the impact of AI on language education and has been working in this area for quite a while now. Since the release of tools like ChatGPT, he's been at the forefront of helping teachers navigate things like the possibilities of AI, challenges of academic integrity, and the shifting role of teachers in AI-supported classrooms. His workshops and keynotes that he's been doing over decades have been presented at organizations such as the TESOL International, educational technology conferences around the world, including our own JALTCALL. He's also lived in Japan, which we'll obviously dive into later on as well. So with that, we'd like to start the podcast section 1 here, which is about your background. Section 2 will be about current interests and research themes, and then the third section will be about future forward-thinking topics.
Awesome.
So first of all, very briefly, could you tell us about your journey to where you are today? I say briefly, but including any connections to Japan.
Yeah. So I first moved to Japan when I was 18 years old. I did kind of I think many people probably listening would have a similar-ish experience or hey, what's it like studying abroad, living over there? So I did some of that. I lived in Kanazawa the first time I went, and in particular, I was kind of focused on well, one back then when I when I was 18, the internet was fairly limited in Japan, and so the only language program that I found that wasn't in Tokyo, I wasn't particularly interested in going to Tokyo, was in Kanazawa.
Mm.
And so that's partly why I ended up there. And then, I went back and forth through the years. Sometimes I was a student, and then sometimes I got into teaching, and I was doing some teaching stuff. And so I think, over the span of the years, I probably lived in Japan for about 9 or almost 10 years actually living there over the span of getting close to 30 years.
Mm.
And so in and out. But yeah, so the last time I was there was 2 years ago. I was on my sabbatical project. And so I got a year off of teaching to work on my project. Which is a book on education technology for English language learners.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so I wrote that all from Japan, and it was really great. I had a lot of flexibility and freedom. And so during that time, as I was writing the book, we also bought a Toyota Hiace and traveled the
Mm.
entire country. So we went to all 47 prefectures.
Wow. Wow.
We camped out in the Michinoekis and, did the whole thing. And it was a
Mm.
lot of fun. But yeah, so my history in Japan is like I said, quite fairly long. My mother actually went to Japan and lived there and went to Sophia University
Mm.
in the 60s, and then my great aunt and great uncle, my mother's great aunt and uncle, were there since before World War II. And in fact, if you go to uh, the Peace Museum in Hiroshima, and if you go and walk through the displays, you can see my aunt's artwork.
Wow.
She's American. She was an American, but she was very tied in with the Japanese community. And she was the person who drew the little flyers that were before the fire bombings. And so all the
Mm,
flyers that were dropped over to warn people, hey, be careful, watch
mm-hmm.
out, be careful of these things. And so she was involved in that side of the conversation. And then my great uncle was the first foreigner to become a lawyer in Japan. And so all these things tied together.
Mm-hmm.
As you guys know, becoming a lawyer in Japan is not easy, right? It's very, 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 very big challenge. So he was the first person that got that, and then he also last time we went there, we found out that he introduced fly fishing to Japan as well. So if you go out to Yozawa outside of Tokyo, you can actually see a bronze memorial to him and his
Amazing.
introduction of fly fishing. So weird little things that are all tied together that are fun to see and fun to know about. But yeah, so that all ties my broad history in Japan, and
Mm,
then most of the time I lived in actually in Kobe, and so
mm.
I lived in Kanazawa, I lived in Gunma for a while, and then I lived in Kobe for the most of the time.
Wow, amazing. That's quite the history. Yeah, much more
Yeah,
of a
we get to
connection
bring you
than.
home, right?
I know I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited to be back.
So it sounds like from your experience, then you've had a fair amount of time in Japan, but you spent more time in America. It sounds like to me.
Yeah.
So Irvine Valley College, is that where you've been for a long time, or is it a recent job, or what's your?
I've been here, so as a full-timer, I'm a tenured professor, so I've been here for 10 years.
Okay.
Did a couple of years, maybe before that as a part-timer. So similar to Japan, there's that structure of part-timers
Yeah.
like going, working multiple colleges and doing those
Hmm.
things. I graduated from University of Southern California, and USC hired me as a professor there. But I shouldn't say this on the air, but one of the dirty secrets of American universities is that everybody wants to work at the community colleges and not
Ah,
so much at the universities.
interesting.
It's not
Okay.
100% true, but
Mm-mm.
but certainly for teachers who are teacher focused, teaching
Yeah.
teachers instead of
Like
research teachers.
education versus research kind of
That's
balance.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
So
aware of that in the sciences, which is my background. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that is kind of so for me. I was like, I had kind of the prestigious role at the well-known university, but as soon as the opportunity came up for teaching at the community college, I knew that's where I wanted to be.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I didn't realize that that was a thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
Yeah.
the
because
info.
yeah, you're British. I wonder if it's different, but this is
We don't really have community colleges that much. It's not a
um,
not a concept that I'm that aware of. We have, I guess we have technical colleges, but they're slightly different. Yeah.
so your path from Japan and back to America, a lot of people want to know that story. That's also a very significant step for many people who start here
Mm.
and then wonder if they can work elsewhere. Um,
Mhm.
that's not the purpose of this podcast, but definitely your story matters. And I'm sure that would be interesting for our audience as well. So.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can. For sure, that's a thing. I think the one thing that people struggle with is getting full-time jobs in America probably means that you need to have some part-time experience first. And so a lot of times I see people they might be applying for a full-time position and they have only experience in Japan or
Mm.
some other country. And that's a little bit of a struggle because it's like, well, do you know what the system is like here? Do you really understand what it means? Like the issues that are issues in Japan are not going to be the same applied issues of the things that we're talking about in the American context or whatever else it is. So, it's not to say that it's impossible, but certainly coming in and getting part-time jobs in the colleges is much more doable than maybe many people think. I think there's an image that it's like, oh, it's going to be really hard to get my foot in the door. But part-time jobs teaching are pretty doable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're a good teacher and you kind of, you've honed your craft.
Mhm.
There's always a spot for good teachers who love what they're doing and are ready to contribute. And so I would say that if you're willing to kind of take that risk, I know it's hard when you're going
Yeah.
from, a full-time job or not, but if you're willing to take that risk, you can certainly get, and you can even apply from overseas. And I think a lot of community colleges at least would hire someone as a part-timer saying, hey, I know I'm going to be there in August and I'm ready to start at that time. Is that okay? I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot more flexibility around that than maybe people anticipate, but jumping from full-time to full-time, that
Mhm.
is a large jump
Mm-hmm.
that might be more of a challenge for a lot of people.
Very interesting for our audience, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
can
Thanks
talk.
for that.
If anybody wants to know more about it, I'm happy to talk about it some
Yeah.
when we're
Meet
at
us
the
at the
conference.
conference. Pull them aside.
So you've been working in educational technology, ed tech, for a while now. What was the initial interest? What drew you to technology and language teaching?
So I was always kind of into technology, like nerdy technology stuff,
Hmm.
at some level. I did, so when I was in high school and college, I was doing these like, punk rock fanzines and stuff, and then
Mm.
we changed them into online fanzines, right? So like when
Mm.
when the first row of those online zines started coming out, so I was doing some of that stuff and programming the websites myself, and figuring out how to do all those things. And so I was kind of always tied in with this world of bringing my outside world interest into technology and figuring out how those things go. And then I was also a little bit interested in that when I started teaching, and I didn't totally see it until actually, so when I was teaching in Japan, there wasn't a lot of room to integrate technology because even back then, I was back
Mm.
on my AU basic, pre-smartphones, all
Mm.
those
Mm. Mm.
ones. And so there wasn't a lot to bring in. But when the very first iPad came out, I was living in Japan at the time, and I actually had my dad wait in line
Mm.
at the store here in California. And so he waited in line, got up early in the morning, and actually bought it and overnighted it to me in Japan. So I always claimed that I was the first person in Japan to ever have an iPad.
You
And
might have been. You
I
got a
was
lot of
You
getting
might have
firsts in
been.
your
looks
family.
for sure. Yeah, I know, right? Like I was getting looks because I had it on the train, right? And like I'm looking at this thing, and clearly it's on the news and everything, right? And so anyways, I had it and I was trying to integrate it, but there was so basic on the app, so I would like bring it in a little bit into my class. But then very, very shortly after, I was selected to be a teacher on the Peace Boat, and so I
Mm.
think
Ah,
you've seen the posters around town, whichever town you're in, I'm sure.
Mm.
And so I went
every
on the
bar
Peace.
has one in the toilet.
Yeah, yeah. So I went on the Peace Boat. Did the circle around the world, and part of it was like, hey, how am I going to bring in ideas, or it was very simple things, right? Like loading music and bringing in music to things, or having a couple of like basic interactives. But after that, then kind of the tech world was opening up at the same time. The whole ed
Mm.
tech industry was coming into
Mm.
everything, and so it kind of all lined up as I was integrating it into my teaching at the same time as all of those things. And it took me a little while to find my like-minded people. I was really struggling at the beginning, like who else is doing this stuff? What else is going on? And felt a little lonely at the start. And so then I started sharing. I started going to conferences. People started, following and having those same conversations around conferences. This is
Mm.
actually where I met Ishell, my co-host for the podcast, and so we were kind of kindred spirits in the conversation of like integrating tech and kind of making things more modern for students. And so yeah, that's kind of how we got into that world.
Beautiful. And that's an excellent segue into my next question, which is about the podcast, the DIESOL podcast. So how has that shaped the way that you think about teaching and teacher development? How does that interface with your own professional development, essentially?
Oh, it's so much. If you can start a podcast, do it. Like, because what it
Mm,
does is it motivates you to sit down and spend the time keeping up with your craft in your world,
mm,
right? And
mm,
so,
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
so it's not so much that you have to be like this, like we don't care about being famous or whatever else it is, right? That's
mm,
not our
mm,
motivation for it. Really, our motivation is, two things. One, helping other teachers see what else is out there because they might be in those kind of lonely categories, feeling like they don't have another person to talk to directly. And so like, hey, we want to be that person that's kind of sharing ideas and that, we're kind of your partners in that conversation. But two, and the selfish side of it is you learn so much when you're doing it because you're like, hey, what's going on? Like, let me make sure that I'm keeping up with these things. Let me make
mm,
sure that I'm talking to my students about it, to other teachers, and seeing what's going on. And so on a selfish level, like I'm a PD nerd, right? Like I like going to
mm,
the conferences, I like going to all these things, learning from other people, and so I get a real opportunity to pursue those things in different ways. And then when like we say, if you really want to know something, teach it, right? And so
yeah,
part of the
yeah.
conversation around doing that as a
Absolutely.
podcast is we get a deeper understanding of what we're talking about, and we're hopefully a little bit better at conveying the value of certain things or lack of value of certain things, depending on what we're talking about, I guess.
Absolutely. I really like that. That vibrates with, I think, a lot of why conferences exist. Not everyone can do a podcast, right?
Sure,
But
sure, sure.
conferences also provide that outlet as well. And this is why we're doing this podcast too, but not everyone can go to the conference. So
Yeah,
having
yeah.
that extra anytime available online kind of which is ties into your first thing that you got your iPad and you're like bringing it into the classroom. You're trying to incorporate different kinds of medium into the classroom at the very beginning stages. I think we're all still trying to do that, even though there's so much, now there's too much out there.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
And
Not
people
enough
who,
to too much, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
So actually, it's not that you can't find someone doing it. It's like there's too many people doing too many different things. And I
Mm.
think that's also another issue that we also need to address, which is
Yeah.
kind of connected to our theme we'll talk about later. But yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think that part of that is that you have to find who resonates with you, right? And I think that's
Absolutely.
that's the thing. So it's like I know that my voice is not going to be the one for everybody, and that's totally cool, right? Like
Mm.
you can find that next person, you can find that person who like, hey, I really, I like this YouTube channel instead. That's the guy that's going to help me out. Or I found this this woman on LinkedIn who's really sharing a lot of just amazing ideas, and I want to follow her more often and get her, and whoever it is, right? Like that's a really wonderful side of technology. And I have issues with technology myself. I consider myself a pragmatist around these things, so it's not all just like
Nice.
shiny bubbles and everything's beautiful, right? There's some real problems,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
social media world too. But on the other hand, it's like, well, I never would have found you, right, if I didn't have
Yeah.
this. I never would have known that this is going on. And so the more you can kind of focus those things in, be thoughtful about your choices around who you're following or what ideas you're pursuing. I think that is it is the best part about technology is that you can connect with the people that speak your language and
Mm.
and make it a thing where you feel more fulfillment in the work that you're doing or an understanding of other people who are trying to move towards the same goal that you're going towards.
That is us for section one. Thank you so much for the insightful responses to our questions, Brent. So join us after the break where we will dive into Brent's current work and explore what AI means for the present and future of language education.
Okay, welcome back with me, James and Brent. In recent years, Brent has focused heavily on artificial intelligence and language education. One particularly interesting direction in Brent's work is the idea of building AI-powered tools and bots that support language learning tasks, blending ideas from gamification and games, conversational AI, and learner autonomy. Welcome back, everybody. All right, our first question. Your recent talks include things like building AI bots to gamify language learning. So what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah. So the really cool thing about AI and working with a lot of these tools is, of course, the seemingly natural interactions that we have with them. And so essentially you can build any game or any activity that you want on a simple if-then structure, right? So, hey, if I recognize what I'm wanting my students to do as a step one, then I can build that in and turn it into a step two, and moving down the line. Now, for now, I'm just going to talk only about text bots. So there are other conversations around voice or, maybe even video or other things like that. But just the first level of this conversation is around text. And so basically, you end up going into a lot of the tools now are starting to have their, I have to be careful because the language keeps shifting around this a little bit, but the first level of the agent's conversation was a custom bot that is meant to do what you want. So you program it on the back end and then it responds to you with that idea in mind. So I think a lot of people now are starting to become more familiar with something like Notebook LM, or if you've used Nectar or Boodlebox or Playlab or any of these tools, and look them up if you haven't looked at them. I use Playlab a lot, so playlab.ai. And so basically what you do is as the teacher, you can go into the back end and you can program it to do all the things that you want it to do. So you say, hey, when we interact, this is what I want you to do. This is the level of student that you're going to be interacting with. I want you, and I usually use the Cepher levels as my kind of guidepost because Cepher has the best documentation online, and so it's most robust in terms of its
Mm.
ability to closely match the language levels of the students. But so I would say something like, okay, this is meant to be for a Cepher B1 level student, and if they do this, then this. If they do that, then that, and kind of walk through the possibilities of a conversation that they might have with an AI. Um, One quick note on that Cepher thing, it's much better to use a standardized level than it is to use like beginning, intermediate, or advanced because that doesn't mean anything.
Mm. Mm.
And so, as you may know, hey, you're going to teach an advanced level class, and you're like, whose advanced is this, right? Like
Mm. Mm. Mm.
it's a real
Yeah.
it changes from school to school and from class to class and all those kinds of things. But when you have something that is
Also
defined,
country to country, right?
yeah,
Like
True, that's
Japan,
absolutely.
I
true.
find
Yeah.
Japan is actually lower on the Cepher scale than the average around the world. So
There's a
when
J
we,
Sapphire as well, actually, right? So,
is there no?
Is there?
mm.
Okay, yeah. So,
Yeah, it's very
so
different.
yeah, so
We're
you,
much lower in context because of the different skill set that they have
yeah,
than an average
yeah.
student in Europe or something.
Oh, for sure, right? And so, and I see this, even I've got my students from, you know, Ukraine and from, well, I very rarely have students from like Norway or anything like that, but then versus our, students from Japan or from China or wherever
Mm.
it is, right? So, anyways, these levels, as the better definitions you can have around them, the better work you can do with building and using these types of tools. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so what I started doing was building these types of activities where students could interact with it, but then you can build them in ways that contextualize it to the interests of the students, right? And so I think the biggest thing that's most important is when they first sign into one of these things, it says one, first, what's your name? Two, okay, give me a couple of your favorite hobbies or your favorite interests or, actors or whatever else it is. And so as soon as the students start putting in those things, then the back end, it's going to say, take those and use those to create all of your examples of what you're going to be talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the student likes, Harry Styles, then they can talk about Harry Styles and get, activities around that. If they like, for me, like I'm a coffee nerd, right? And so it's like, give me some coffee conversations around all of this, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
so we'll see. So then it moves those conversations, but then once it's interesting to the students, they're going to be much more likely to stick with it and deal with it as compared to the joke that I always make is like all of these traditional textbooks, they kind of treat the world as though there are three cities. It's Los Angeles, New York, and London, right? And that's the limit of the world, and that's everybody's goal when they're studying English. And it's like, well, hold on a second, like that's not any reality. And for example, even here in California, California, we're, I'm here just outside of Los Angeles, but I've got so many students, or, I go up the coast a little bit and inland, and there's farmland, and those people are never going into major cities. That's not their goal, but
Mm,
we can still teach them English around the world that they live in and the things that they understand. And so, all of these things are when you're building games and you're building activities and you're contextualizing it around the world that they know, then
mm,
you get more of a, like, I can go in and check the back end, and it's like, oh, students are just logging into this for themselves for fun, right? It has nothing
mm,
to do with like it's no longer about the class. It's about, yeah, I'm practicing English a little bit, but actually I care
mm,
about this content. And so I was really excited about that possibility. And then as AI has gotten better with like kind of keeping the memory of the same conversation, is that it can reach back into those things and say, let me pull that forward again. Let me talk about that. Um, so briefly, like I've been playing with a little bit of vibe coding and building out your own custom apps. And so one of the things that you can do, like the one that I just built 2 days ago, is using verbs with the gerund or the infinitive, right? And so if you say, "Hey, does the word like, is it get followed by a gerund and an infinitive, or both, right?" And then they can drag that. So basically it builds a little, an app screen. They can
mm,
drag the word into the right bucket, and then it says, hey, that's right or that's wrong, right? So it's kind of the same as multiple choice. But then
mm,
what you do is you say, and then once they get that, then open up a text box and then have them write a sentence. So it's not just about recall memory, it's about production
mm.
memory at the same time, right? So you're doing both parts, or you're adding in multiple levels of learning and interaction with it. And so that again lets us build a lot more opportunity for things for students to work either on their own or with the support of a teacher, and get a more full and proper pedagogical experience rather than just like, oh, I'm clicking, the quiz, multiple choice quiz all the way down the line.
Yeah. Can I?
Go ahead, yeah.
Just a follow-up to actually both parts. The first part about um, making content specific to each student's interests. I think you touched on the fact that it will maybe improve motivation because it's a topic that they're familiar with and interested in. I
Hmm.
think the second benefit of that is that it lowers cognitive demand because if you already are familiar with the context and the content, then it's more of a case of using your existing knowledge but translating it into the L2.
Hmm.
That's a single step rather than a completely unknown topic that you're both having to learn the topic and then translate into the L2. So it actually lowers the cognitive demand as well, and it's something that I've been also had experience with. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really cool thing to see. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's like, so you don't have to do all the scaffolding work, right, to just
Mm,
prepare them
mm.
for
Yeah,
the activity, right? It's like you can get right into it.
right,
It's super cool.
The
right.
second part about vibe coding, I think we had a question about this as well. So just to clarify then, well, I guess I'll get you to clarify what is vibe coding, and my follow-up question would be then, so you're developing your own apps for use in the classroom, is that correct? So yeah, those two
Yes.
parts. Yeah.
Yeah. So, vibe coding, I mean, these terminologies, they always, as soon as they come up, then a bunch of people reject them or whatever else it is. But basically, the idea is, you are using plain English to code, apps or websites or interactive activities or things like that. So, if we kind of imagined, Kahoot as an app, right? Quick multiple choice options, right? Music and pretty colors and all those things. You could theoretically say, develop a quiz app that gives
Mm,
four multiple choices, with one more difficult distractor and one of the ones that's a correct answer, and then create 20 questions for students to go through, right? And it would then and
yeah.
say make it beautiful, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
you use just plain English to tell it what to do, and these tools are amazing. I mean, I just did another one this morning. It's just like it just sits there and it just builds out all the
Yeah.
HTML,
Yeah.
all the code
Right,
inside of
right.
it and everything,
So
and then it
could
just
you
flips it around.
clarify for those starting out,
Mhm.
where do we go to do the vibe coding? So it sounds like vibe coding can be applied to any LLM, right? You
Yeah.
can talk to any LLM and be able to do that. So give us an example of where you do your. building?
Yeah. So the place, so it's funny, I did a session on this recently and I was like, okay, there's this tool and this tool and this tool. And then one person in my session, she just completely flipped it on its head and we all just moved in the direction that she said. I was running the session and we're like, wait, we can do this. Let's all do it because it's so cool because that's what happens, right, when you're working together. But she's like, well, you can do this Canva, in Canva code. So if you have an educator's account to Canva, which I think most of us as teachers can get some level of access, you can go turn on. So basically, you go into Canva, and right at the top it says Canva AI. You click on Canva AI, and then it gives you a couple options down below, and one of them is code, and you can click on code, and then it will say like, hey, your intention here is to build out a, some sort of app. And so then plain level English, you tell it what you want it to do, and this is all inside of Canva, and it will split the screen. So on the left-hand side, you'll have the chat. On the right-hand side, you'll have the actual app that it builds out.
Mm.
And then you can kind of talk through it. I do recommend that you maybe talk through it with a different chat app first because you kind of want to have a sense of what you're doing, because Canva itself might limit the amount of times you can use it in a certain period
Mm.
of time. So, hey, go to Gemini or,
Mm.
Copilot or whatever you use, and then, put those ideas together, tell it what you want it to really look like, and then as you kind of brainstorm with it, then you can say, okay, now give me a final output of what we're looking for. Then you copy that prompt into Canva and it
Mm.
will build it out for you. Now, I will say the one thing that you have to be aware of is don't expect it to be perfect the first time. So, as
Mm.
with all things AI, you're going to want to iterate. So, it's like iterate, 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 right? Test and iterate. And so it builds something out, and I was like, it's not getting what I wanted. And then, like, so for example, I made this activity that was like just an exit ticket for, general question exit tickets. And then what it does is every time we click on one of these cards, it flips it over and then it reveals a picture in the background and the students are trying to guess what the picture in the background is. That's when they can leave the class, right? But when you click on it, it'll pop up a question. A student has to answer it. So anyways, I was having a hard time because every time it wouldn't load a picture in the background. So I kept saying, well, hey, there's no picture in the background. And then it's like,
Mm.
okay, let me fix it. And I said, there's still no picture in the background. Okay, let me fix it. And
Mm.
then I kept just saying like, hey, something's going on because there's still no picture in the background. And I was basically just giving it the same response over and over again. And eventually
Mm.
it's like, oh, okay, I see what the problem is. And it actually fixed it.
Mm.
So it's kind of a dumb level of iteration, but at the same
Mm.
time, if you're willing to sit through a couple of those minutes, you have to
Yeah.
recognize, hold on a second, I just built an app that would take somebody months and months and months, and my 3 or 4 iterations of dealing with it is not actually that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And then in Canva, the super cool thing, you can click on publish and it will give you a URL that you can give directly to the students, and then they can just log into it directly on an open site, and then you can have it for them indefinitely for them to play with. So it's really powerful that way. You could also download the code into the backend if you're a little bit more technically savvy, upload it to your own website. There's
Mm.
options like that. I usually like to start these conversations at the little bit simpler level, which is you don't have to host anything, you don't have to
Mm. Mm.
run
Mm.
anything, you don't now have to know how to FTP your files, like all these things where people are like, no, I'm not, check out, I'm gone, right?
Mm. Mm.
But you can just click on the publish button and then get the URL and send
Mm.
that off to your students through your LMS or through email or whatever, and they're good to go.
Cool. So it's like basically an app that you designed that resides in Canva, so you don't have to host it yourself.
Yeah.
So for teachers that maybe are still a little bit confused about what that might mean, it's like you could generate your own Kahoot
hmm
or something similar for students to use, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so there's actually a couple of starter tools that are built in there. So you can, when you click on those couple of steps, so again, Canva AI
Yep.
code, then
Yeah.
right down below it has a few. So one of them says like, vocabulary matching game, right? And then you
Oh,
just
okay.
customize it a little bit, say, oh, I want it to be around, grocery store vocabulary or whatever else it
Mm. Mm.
is,
Mm.
right? And so it will build it for you. So I like that it gives you kind of a sense of what you can do. But then once you start actually getting creative with everything, you're like, oh, hold on a second. How far can I go with this? Right. And people can get really interesting stuff going on.
Amazing. Jeanette, back to you with the questions.
Yeah, so this goes all the way back to one of my first questions I was listening. We want to know what you're building on these things, but what's the purpose in your classrooms? What tasks are you trying to have the students actually do? What skills are they trying to practice? Give us a sense of the type of the tools that you built, the apps that you built, and then are they learning to read something? Are they learning to write some things. So can you give us the idea of in the classroom,
Hmm.
how do you actually apply them?
Yeah. So for me, I think the main places that I use these are grammar, and I do reading and writing stuff as well. So grammar stuff, part of that is just because grammar activities traditionally they're just so boring, right? Like they're so dull and like, hey, fill out the worksheet, do all the rest of the worksheet, right? And so how do we make that a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, a little bit more connected for them, and something that they'll want to come back to on their own? And so grammar is one for sure where it's like, hey, if you're a linguistic nerd, like I imagine everybody listening, right? Okay, we'll have tons of fun with these things, but maybe the average student doesn't love that as much, right? And so again, that contextualized work lets them have the time to um, actually put in the amount of time that they need to process that language, right? And
Hmm.
again, I usually do things as low stakes assignments for these. So it's
Hmm.
much more about just practicing and getting the repetitions in. I think there's been a lot of shame around the concept of repetitive, skill and drill type of conversation, but I think it's really important for learning a language. And so I always use the analogy of like, when you're shooting baskets, right? If you
Hmm.
play basketball, you don't just shoot once and you make it and you're like, okay, cool, I'm ready to join the Lakers, right? Like, no, that's not how it
Hmm.
works. You have to keep on shooting, you have to keep on playing, you have to keep on fine-tuning that muscle memory. And so, and language skills are the same thing, right? It's like you have to keep being not only exposed to it, but you have to be interacting with it and using it for it to become, uh, you know, deeply
Muscle
embedded,
memory.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
muscle
Hmm.
memory. So I have that conversation with my students about it too, and we say, hey, let's talk about this because we want to make it more fun for you, but you need to put that time in if you're going to want to master this. So let's find ways that are going to be more fun for you to do that.
I think the
Um,
Hmm.
conversation is important, definitely.
yeah, oh yeah,
You need to know the
absolutely.
why. Yeah.
Yeah, every time I'm always talking to my students about their learning. It's always, context dependent, like what's going on, why am I doing these things, right? So that's like, that's one of the big andragogy conversations is like the differences between pedagogy and andragogy is that your adult students are going to want to know why they're doing things and how it benefits them. And so you can bring in a little bit of those conversations, talk about what it means, why it helps them, that I'd rather them do 5 minutes a day rather than, like all week long, rather than a 1 hour cram study session right before,
Definitely.
all,
Yeah.
all those types of things, right? So that's kind of like the grammar side of things. We also do things like, text analysis through conversations with literary characters. So,
Hmm.
one of the examples I often give is I don't teach it in my current class, but in my previous class, I used to teach Fahrenheit 451. And
Hmm.
so I love that book. It's one of my favorites. And so we would have the students, they'd read the book and we would do regular activities, reading circles, pair work, kind of understanding, looking at it through different lenses. But then one of those lenses would be to put them in the role of a character, right? So hey, you're gonna be Montag, you're gonna be talking to Faber. Faber's gonna come back and forth, and you're gonna have these conversations with them. And then I set it all up on the back end. It's really well. I mean, the AI, like all the information it has about Fahrenheit 451, of course, is huge, right? But its ability to even capture Faber's voice, if you're that much into the literature, you're like, oh my God, that actually sounds like the way that he talks as compared to other characters in the book. And so then you get these conversations. And you say, well, what kind of questions, if you were Montag, what would you ask Faber maybe during some of these downtime, right? And they're
Hmm.
like,
Hmm. Hmm.
oh, okay, hold on a second. This is what I want to know. And then we have the real conversation saying, hey, this is not Ray Bradbury's intention, right? Don't let's not misunderstand that. But at the same time, we all live in this world where everybody's expecting these expanded universes and they're kind of playing around with these ideas of multiple approaches to things. And so they're like, okay, I get it, right? Like it's not the real thing, but it gives me insight into a different way to look at characters or conversations or things that might have happened or whatever else it is. And then we talk about that as the thing for them to analyze and say, well, what new insights did you gain about the book based on your, your artificial conversation? Do you agree or do you disagree with them? And that's always an important part, especially with
Mm,
AI, is like challenging them to challenge the AI, right? And be like,
mm,
I
mm,
don't think I like that, or I think that might be interesting, but I want to change it that way around. Because the really wonderful thing about broken AI, right, is like all the problems with AI is that is the perfect time to go in and talk to students and remind them, hey, you cannot trust this thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
fun, it's interesting, there's all sorts of things you can grow from it, but trusting it is not one of the things that you should be doing, right? And
Mm,
so
mm, mm,
so how much are you going to take it and how much of your own critical thinking are you going to give up
mm,
for this?
mm.
And so trying to be
Right.
realistic about that side of the conversation, because then it folds into the plagiarism conversation. It's like, well, if you just have it do something for you, are you sure it's going to actually make something that's actually good? Or are you just
Mm.
thinking that because the English grammar is good, it's going to be a good paper?
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of problems around that, of course.
That brings us to my last question of this section, which is, I mean, our theme for this year's Jolt Call is prevail or fail, and you just beautifully presented all the issues that we know that AI has. So I don't want you to give any spoilers, but can you just kind of give us an idea of what you might expect from your presentation
The
at
keynote.
our keynote? Sorry,
Yeah.
let's
Ooh.
get a big banner. Your beautiful keynote on Saturday, and tell us what you plan to maybe just hint about what you're going to be talking about for us.
Yeah, that is going to be this conversation is going to be kind of guiding it, which is
Mm,
along the lines of really understanding the benefits and the drawbacks of these tools and communicating that clearly to everybody. I myself, I have my own ups and downs. Like, I know at some level it's been like, hey, like Brent's talking about AI stuff, but I'm also, if you go in and look at my LinkedIn, I share plenty of things where I'm like, this is not cool. This is not an acceptable thing to be doing.
mm,
There are real problems with this as well. And so I think that there's a false sense that, we need to either be cheerleaders or naysayers completely. But
mm,
the reality is there's so much cool stuff you can do with these tools, and there are so many horrifying things that can happen because of them. And we can't live in a world that just chooses one side. We really need to be able to say, hey,
mm,
hold on a second. Let's look at the places where we can think and use this and help it to build us and make better, things and options. And, we're seeing awesome things like, you know, better steps towards cure for cancer and like these wonderful amazing things, right? And of course we're going to see these really horrible things like we're seeing here, the AI integration into war machines and these terrible conversations that we're having right now in the United States, of course. So these are all like the reality of the conversation, right? How do we both take joy moving forward and take caution stepping back, right? And so for me, that's going to be the guiding principle of the conversation. We'll talk about specifics and we'll talk about ideas inside of there, but that's kind of where I'll be talking about most of
And
the time.
I really like the word you just said, conversation. I love the fact that even though you're going to be a keynote speaker, it's not one way. I hope we all get a chance to hear each other's voices. And we welcome you.
Thank you.
So thank you. So that's it for our section 2. Join us after the break when we come back, and Brent's going to recommend some AI tools for us, possibly.
Welcome back with me, Jeanette, and Brent. As we wrap up, we want to ask Brent about some resources and ideas for teachers who want to keep learning and experimenting with technology. So for teachers who want to understand AI in education more deeply, are there any books or podcasts or researchers that you recommend following?
Is that a setup? Uh, well, I guess my publisher would be angry if I did not say that I have a book out on these conversations. So I have a book from ISTE that came out fairly recently called EdTech for Multilingual Learners. That is not an AI book. It is it's based around activities. So basically, the idea is preparing teachers to have activities that they can integrate into their classes. Some parts are AI, of course, and other parts are not. But the idea is more of, yes, I'm giving you these activities that you can do and work with, but I kind of tried to build it as a Trojan horse to say, build your own creativity, take these in different directions, figure out what's going to work for you and for your students. And so I definitely do not think that I have all the answers, and all these things change and they're so contextually dependent. And so
Absolutely.
I tried to build the book in a way that lets you have the freedom to make your own choices, and say,
Beautiful.
I'm going to move it this way, I'm going to do it this way. And so
My own book. Sorry, my own book is called Freedom to Play,
I
and
love it, love it, love it. Okay,
yeah.
Well,
we'll do a book
I
swap.
want to stop you there for a little bit, Brent.
Jeanette, where's your book? Where's your book?
It's coming soon. It's
Woo!
actually about AI and how it can be our friend.
Sick.
Oh,
To
nice.
Okay.
be announced later. But I want to go back to what you just said. You started AI is not the only thing, and I was like, "Hello, AI is the new thing. That doesn't replace everything." And you assumed by our question in the first, maybe it was prompted by me. It's not all about AI. Our conference is not all about AI,
Hmm.
and
That's a good point.
and
Yeah.
I mean. James specifically does not use AI in general and his tech and ed. And I am very heavy AI, but that's just because there's no tool that was there to support what I'm trying to do, and AI
Hmm.
has. So it doesn't replace anything. I'm using AI because there was nothing there.
Yeah.
So I think your book is very valid no matter if AI is still exists, because it's not AI can't replace everything. So
And that's the idea. So one of the big things that I say right up at the front of the book is, AI is a part of EdTech. EdTech is not a part of AI, right? And so,
exactly,
so
yes.
you're saying, hey, if we're looking at that umbrella, like this is a section, and yes, we feel like it's everywhere, but it doesn't have to be, right? And in fact,
Yeah.
what I really love the most are individual tools, right? Like individual focus specific tools. Like that's what I like to give my students, and that's actually why I'm interested in the vibe coding conversation, is because I can build out one thing that does a specific purpose that, really helps out with one highly focused area. And so I get worried, like to me, AI in general, the conversation feels like Microsoft Word. It's like so bloated, and there's so many things that are like, do I need all of those things? What
Mm,
parts of these are really necessary? And so it's
mm,
like, hey, let's focus in. And so individual tools are really, to me, quite useful. I actually so I guess another plug, but I wrote the ELT toolkit for TESOL International, and so that is, it's a subscription you can log into, but it's me
mm,
guiding people through different tools and like how you might use that tool in your classroom. A little bit of explanation with some ideas. Same concept in the sense of like, hey, you might use it your own way, you might change it around, but here are the first steps to getting started with some of these tools that might be useful. Do you need something for vocabulary or for, writing or reading or whatever else it is? And so those are mine, but certainly I am not the only person out there talking about things. There are all sorts of, like to me, my main social media is LinkedIn these days. The rest of it is too horrifying to spend much time on. So I'm just kind of like, let's keep my eye focused on work related things. But there's just a lot of really interesting teachers out there sharing different ideas. Um, uh, we mentioned Gary Ross, I think, earlier in the conversation. It's like he's doing super cool stuff over there. There's
mm.
lots of amazing teachers in Japan doing some super cool stuff. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the presentations there. But
Yeah, I've already
at
seen
the
a sneak
conference.
peek. There's some really interesting topics. So
I'm so looking
really
for. I mean,
excited.
I had such a good time the last time, and I'm really looking forward to it because so many people are just really digging in and building some interesting ideas and ways to play with things. And so yeah, there is a whole world out there of all sorts of people sharing and coming up with ideas. And
So your
I'm
current
happy to be one part of it.
your current tools that you use, you mentioned Canva.
Mhm.
Is there any other specific tools that you build with that you could give people, maybe hint at your little toolkit that you mentioned, that little
Yeah,
spoiler
sure.
for your toolkit?
So some of them are simple. I'm going to take it way back to an old school tool that I still love to use and to share, which is Vocaroo, vocaroo.com. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It is the most simple website, which is you click a button and you can record your voice, and you can either have it up there or you can download your voice, right? And so any voice that you're doing with your class, if you're having students, make little recordings, very, very simple podcasts where they're just talking to each other, conversation recordings. I use
Mm.
Vocaroo pretty much, there's all these much, much fancier tools for all of this. And I'm like, no, Vocaroo is the one that I want, right? Keep it simple, keep it really straightforward with everything. So that one is one that I do tend to like figuring out. There are other tools. So if we're talking AI side of things, I am more leaning into, partly because our school has institutional access, but Gemini. So Google Gemini is kind of my one choice this time. I'm also using Claude. So I'm doing a lot of work with Claude. I haven't actually used Claude for the coding yet, which is the vibe coding conversation, but everyone's like, oh, Claude does amazing coding, and I'm just like, I just haven't sat down with it yet to do that one, but I will by the time the conference comes. And Jeanette, it sounds like you're doing some of that as well. And then some of the there are really straightforward tools that are really useful. One of my favorite ones is Snagit. So from the people who make Camtasia is Snagit. It's a screen capture tool, and so I think we have a
I
lot of
use
these
that.
different.
Yeah.
You do,
I
yeah. I
think
mean,
yeah.
it's super useful, and like so once I got it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I take screenshots all the time. You can very quickly mark it up inside of there, point an arrow to a couple of things, right? It is surprising. It's one of these tools where you almost forget that it's like, oh, this is actually a separate tool.
Mm.
It's so
Mm.
integrated now into part of my life. And so I really do like Snagit as well, and I'm sure there are many others. I'm kind of pulling a. It's the end. I know it's the morning for you guys. It's the end of my brain day here. So,
Oh, good. Oh, good.
but I'm happy to share. And if anybody has questions on particular types of tools, or say, hey, I'm looking for this thing that might do this, I'm happy to share.
I'll find you
Please
on
reach out.
LinkedIn, and
Mm.
you're very strong presence on LinkedIn. A lot of good information. I follow you, so that's always a good way to find some more
Yeah,
information.
please do. And I respond to messages, and so I'm not like it's not just a fake thing up there. I'm really talking to everybody. So please feel free to reach out.
Cool. All right. Final question from us, then, Brent, is if you could give one piece of advice to language teachers navigating this AI era, what would it be?
One step at a time. Uh,
Mm.
that's it. Like, do not overwhelm yourself. Do not try to do all the things all the time. It's not going to help you. It's going to just burn you out.
Yeah.
A teacher, a colleague of ours, a teacher that retired a couple of years ago, I mean, he was already, he was at retirement age, and he would say, like, I really just want to do one tool per semester. And I'm like, dude, that is awesome. Like that's what you
Mm.
should be doing, right? Like, and he's like,
Mm.
I want to figure it out. I just want to play with it. I want to see how it works with my students. I want to get the ins and outs of it. And then I can add another one the next time. It's like, yes, that is 100% the approach. If you want to do these things, it's better to be, a master of one, like jack of all
Yeah,
trades
for
versus
sure.
master of
Mm.
one. And so I highly recommend slowing down, giving yourself the breathing room. You don't have to be all of the things all at once. It is so much better, and it's a more joyous experience when you get a little bit of depth into one thing that you
Mm.
really want to work with. So I highly recommend
That's really
focusing
good
on one.
advice. And when we go to Jolt Call every year, I always feel overwhelmed because of 10 new ideas and I don't know what
Mm.
to do. right. And I've been using that advice already. I usually go with, okay, let me find one that I see immediate use for, and I'll bring it home with me.
Yes.
Nice.
But
And
keep
that's a
note of the
successful
other ones.
conference. Yeah, for
Mm,
sure. And to me, like if I walk away with one really good idea, I'm like, that
mm.
conference rocked. Like that was awesome for me. So yeah, I'm totally with you there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So before we close, we'd like to remind listeners that we have a host of other podcasts coming up with more of our. Actually, we're going to be speaking to the site chairs next time, so look forward to that one. And the JALTCALL Forum, which is coming up at the PAN-SIG in 2026 in Nagoya. That's in May. So yeah, thanks again to Brent for joining us today, for taking time out, and thanks to you, our listeners. So yeah, see you next time. Thanks, Brent.
Thank you so much.